Good morning. Thank you for attending today's program. Um, it's on introduction to produce safety. A lot of the information may be applicable to commercial producers or vegetable producers, but even as a homeowner, I'm sure you can benefit from understanding how the produce can be safe to help you make a decision when you go to a farmer's market or to the store and maybe influence the farmer market producer on following better hygiene or whatever. As a consumer, I believe we have very strong power in affecting our producers. And if you see somebody who is not clean or dirty hands or messy hands, you don't buy from them, and that is a great influence on, or telling them, like, hey, that doesn't look right, can make an influence. With this introduction, again, I thank you for participating, and this is being recorded, so please leave messages, write your message in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation if you have any. Produce safety is a big issue. We all have to be involved in producing safe fruits and vegetables. Of course, it all starts at the farm because the growers know their farm best. They know their production practices, who works for them, and all the details that go into that. As a consumer, knowing the sources of potential hazards in produce safety will also help you stay healthy and reduce any food safety risks. This is relevant because of this new FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, which was signed by President Obama in 2011. And it covers these 7 aspects of production and prevention and supply and demand and all that. In today's presentation, we're only focusing on the first aspect of the FSMA rule. And the FSMA Produce Safety Rule is the first ever mandatory federal standard for growing, harvesting, packing, and holding, that's another word for storage, of fresh produce. As a reminder, please mute your end so there's no echo. All right, some growers are exempt from the rules depending on what commodities they grow, whether they process the commodities they produce, how much they sell, or where do they sell it. And I'll give you, for example, of each. For example, let's say you produce things like asparagus, beans, kidney beans, cashews, sweet corn. Those are generally considered rarely consumed raw, so they are exempt. Because you cook them, you process them, all that safety, health safety are not that important because they get cooked. Items that are canned, like pickling or freezing and drying, that is what we call a kill step. They get processed, so those type of products are considered safe and are not applicable in this produce safety rule. Okay, so and of course, example of other produce that are not covered include ginger, hazelnuts, horseradish, winter squash, potato. Think of any fruit or vegetable that is not consumed raw, and it is exempt, it is excluded from the conversation we're having today. And this, we prepared a table, yes or no table to help our producers to decide if they are exempt or not. again, based on how much they produce. For example, if they sell less than 25,000 or less in annual produce sales, then they are not covered. If they produce uh, if they produce something that's going to be on used for personal or on-farm consumption, then they are not covered. If there's a kill step in the processing, then they are not covered. And when it comes to sales on how much money they produce, if it's more than 25,000 but less than 500,000 in sales, and the majority of the produce they sell goes to um, direct consumer, like at a farmer's market, a restaurant located in the same state, or a store located in the same state, or within 275 miles of the farm, then they are exempt. So if they sell more than 500,000 in annual sales, then they are not exempt, and they must uh, follow the rules and prove that they have a training and a certificate of completion, that they have training, that they are following all the rules covered by FSMA. Okay. Now, what I tell all the growers I work with, even the small mom and pop operation, that even though you are exempt or you are not covered by these rules, you should be prepared to follow the practices, healthy practices, because you are growing food that people eat. And the world is becoming small. What do I mean by that? Meaning, if there's somebody gets sick from eating cucumbers in Germany, which happens, sales of cucumber in the U.S. Drop because it gets on the news. People are afraid to buy cucumbers. So I tell them, you sell at the farmer's market, somebody buys from the farmer's market, uh, and they think they got sick from that produce. They don't know who they bought it from. The whole farmer's market is affected. Everybody, everybody's head on the chopping block. Everybody gets hurt. So even though you may be exempt, please come take the class, learn more about take our certificate of completion, and prove that you are producing safe foods. Um, this is just some statistic to show you where the outbreaks, what produce were implicated the most in terms of associated with pathogen or food related illnesses. Leafy greens and sprouts are the highest because they're not cooked; they're eaten in salads, and uh, you know, um, very very few of us as a homeowner wash with soap and water the leafy greens. We all assume that just because they are packaged in a nice bag from the store that they are sanitized. Well, they are washed and they are clean, but it doesn't take much for a small contamination to spread. Um, so leafy greens and sprout constitute about 50% of the total contaminations or food-related outbreaks, followed by cantaloupe and honeydew melons. Why those melons are an issue? When you look at a cantaloupe or a honeydew melon, the skin of that honeydew melon is porous. It's like a sponge. If you put a honeydew melon in a water with a food coloring in it, let's say blue color, and then you leave it overnight. The next day, if you cut that water cantaloupe open, the blue color went all the way inside because it's like a sponge and it's porous and it will absorb everything that's on the surface. So you can imagine, if it wasn't a food coloring, if it was pathogen from dirty hands, that pathogen is inside. Watermelon is different. Watermelon, the skin is like a plastic wrapping. It does not enter from the skin So it covers only melons and cantaloupe, followed by tomatoes, berry, and all kind of herbs and some fruits that are consumed in salads or eaten fresh. Tomato is unique because the skin of the tomato is like a plastic wrapping. Pathogens do not enter the skin of the because it's not porous. But why is it 10% of all the outbreaks are related to tomatoes? Here's why. The risk from tomato is small, but we consume a lot of tomatoes, lots of tomatoes. So small risk times a very large number of consumption raises the overall risk of tomatoes. So that's why it's there. Not because of the physical structure of the tomato, it's because of the amount of consumption of tomato we eat. No wonder it's called the king of the vegetables because we consume so much of it. Now, there are lots of sources of contaminants, and I'll show you and I'll talk some about that. But microorganisms that are of concern in fresh produce include bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Bacteria, salmonella, you've heard of E. coli, the toxigenic O17, H1707, or Shigella, Listeria are all examples of bacteria that, if they are in your body, will cause all kind of sicknesses. Viruses, norovirus, hepatitis A, and then parasites like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, Cyclospora, all are microorganisms, and you can't see them, you only feel their effects. Of course, there are chemical contaminants, there are physical contaminants, a piece of wood, a piece of metal that fell and got into the produce. Those are an issue, of course, but in terms of food safety, we always think of number one issue, most important is the microorganisms. And why these are, and here's some more, norovirus, hepatitis A virus, why they are of concern is because they are fecal pathogens. They are pathogens of fecal origin, and those tend to appear the most in foodborne illness outbreaks. So what I'm trying to teach you is that know where what the pathogens are, and then where they come from, and logically you'll know that if they are fecal pathogens, if it's hygiene and sanitation is very important, even at the homeowner, even inside your home, then risk can be reduced to a minimum if we wash our hands properly, at home after using the bathroom, if we teach our kids to wash our hands after using the bathroom, because what you don't see, all of these pathogens here, what you don't see can get you really sick, if not kill you. Of course, Listeria is one of those that is found in the soil. It's not a fecal pathogen. But the rest and all of them, including Listeria and Salmonella and E. coli, O157H7, all of them multiply both in the environment and fecal matter and inside your body. Okay, so if you know the potential sources, if you know how the pathogens are spread in the farm, if you know that they are of fecal origin, then you can learn how to be protect yourself. How to, if you visit a farmer's market and you see somebody's hands are not very clean, he looks dirty, his produce looks dirty, you may decide, you know what, maybe I should not buy from him, or tell him something, and why you're not buying from him or her, because it looks dirty, and he should be aware of these issues. That's how we can fix the problem for at the local at the what do you call it, the local level. Of course, bacteria, viruses, you know, differ a little bit than bacteria because they do not multiply in the environment. They multiply in the host. So you eat something that's contaminated, it only multiplies in your body, and they can also be found in contaminated water, not just as from fecal source only. And it doesn't take a lot of virus particles to get someone sick, and they can live a long time in the environment. So just because somebody says, for example, oh, I used manure that's been sitting in the sun for a year, that doesn't mean it's been sanitized by the sun. Whatever viruses or bacteria are there, they are still there. If you use them, they should, everybody, whether at the garden, use manure in the garden, cow manure, horse manure, or at the farm level, you've got to learn how to use it properly. Don't let it touch the produce. You know, incorporate in the soil. Don't let it sit on the surface. And let if it rains, rain will splash the manure particles on the leaf of your plants, for example. Okay. Parasites are the third type that we talked about today. They're commonly transmitted by water. They can also be stable in the environment. And if they are there, even washing with Clorox or other chemical sanitizers may not completely take care of them. Okay, and so it makes it difficult to know when, where, and how the individual became infected, especially when you know that you know you can have it in you for a long time before you show any sign of illness. Something affects your immune system, you catch a cold, and then boom, that parasite multiplies because your immune system is weakened, and it could be 6 months after you got the initial infection. I'm not going to read you all these numbers, but this slide shows you the number of outbreaks linked to produce between 1996 and 2014, and number of deaths. And the hospitalization. So a total of 68 outbreaks, 65 of them were linked to bacteria, 3 were linked to viruses, and you know, it does not take much. Luckily, we're catching them earlier and earlier than before, and the number of deaths is getting less and less because we're catching them early, and hospitalization is doing a great job in preventing further death from that. So the challenge that we have, like I told you, is that one is ignorance. Is we think that because I've been doing it for many years, it should be okay, or ignorance in the sense that hey, this manure has been sitting out in the sun for a year, it should be okay. You know, that's really number one. Another challenge is that most of the fresh produce that we have is eaten, consumed raw, whether fruit like strawberry or cantaloupe or lettuce or a tomato. So they have natural opening, scars, bruises. They have rough surface or folds. I mean, look at this picture here in the lettuce. You can dunk it in a bleach solution 10 times in and out, but because of all the folds that are in that head lettuce leaf in and out, if it was truly contaminated with a fecal source, I doubt that you can clean it 100% just because of all the nooks and crannies that the bacteria or virus can hide in there. Okay, so um, the ignorance one. The second is the consumption. We eat them raw. The third one is the type of the produce that we consume, whether rough surface like the cantaloupe, or whether the seeds on the strawberry, you have all these edges around the seeds, that nice little hole where something can get attached there and will not wash, rinse out easy, or folds in the lettuce head. All those three factors combine and make it a big challenge. So the best way is prevention, is to avoid getting the produce contaminated instead of saying I'll wash it. That's okay, I'll wash it and I'll be okay. Of course, I mentioned that pathogens are not the only source of contaminant. This slide shows you examples of chemical contaminants, whether it's a leak in the refrigerant or a paint or a sanitizer or the cleaner that you didn't rinse really well. All those can be in the fresh produce and are considered contaminant. There are physical contaminants, whether a piece of broken glass, a piece of wood from the pallet or the box, a stone or a small pebble from the field, insulation. All these are examples. Personal effects like jewelry, all those are examples of contaminants. But today's presentation, we're only focusing on the rules of produce safety and how to avoid the pathogen aspects and the sources that come from pathogens. So when we think at the food safety from the homeowner level to the $1 million commercial operation, the major points is sanitation, worker hygiene or personal hygiene, and knowledge that anything that comes in contact with water can become contaminated, so the water has to be clean. If you use dirty water, even if you add soap to it, it does not become sanitized or clean water. So that's why we always tell our producers you have to use potable water when you're washing. And potable means drinkable, drinking quality water, not river water, not pond water. Add soap or add detergent to it and wash your produce with it. And finally, and that's really more applicable for producers, is keep records and train your employees and make sure you keep records of what you're doing in case there are inspections or in case there's an outbreak and it's traced back to you, so you can prove what you're doing and what you did and be safe that way. Because if you did not write it down, it did not happen. You could be doing it, but if you did not write it down as an inspector or in case of an outbreak, if it's not written down, it was not done. We'll go a little bit on all of these sources of contamination on produce. To me, in terms of importance, it's humans, animals, soil, water, or maybe water before soil, and then the tools and the equipment that you use. All of those are factors that can bring in contaminants to the produce that you eat. Humans, like I said, is the most important one because we do carry and we do spread the pathogens to fruits and vegetables, whether you are sick, whether you use the bathroom and wash your hands and you contaminate everything that you're touching, and That's why they are number one, in my opinion, number one factor in potential contamination of produce. Animals, both domestic and wild animals, can carry and transmit human pathogens. So in your case, the homeowner level, if you have a big garden, maybe not let your cat or dog go and use that your vegetable garden uh, to do their business. Maybe put a door or a fence or something, because even domesticated animals can carry and transmit human pathogens. Okay, wild animals, of course, they do, and they and their manure is a source of contaminants. Like I said, remember, when we think of pathogens, you think of fecal source. Um, and from that idea, you can imagine that any fecal source, whether direct or indirect, like the touching or the animal or touching the cleaning the litter, and then you go clean your vegetables. That's terrible. Water, water, because it is the carrier. By itself, pure water is okay, but if a cow or if a dog or a cat defecates in a water pond or a water source, but that water is now contaminated and it can spread those human pathogens and can infect entire fields or large amounts of produce or your whole garden. And whether it's production water, the cleaning water that you use in cleaning, waxing your produce, or unexpected events that you have no control of, like a flood or runoff, can be a potential source of contaminants. Soil and soil amendments, example, are raw manures and other soil amendments that we use. Sometimes people use them too close to harvest, or they're not properly composted, or misconception that they're a pile of horse manure been sitting out in the sun for 3 years, it should be okay, or they were not stored properly, things like that. We think we're fertilizing, but there's more in it than just fertilizer. Okay. Finally, the equipment. This may sanitizing, cleaning, storing, packing equipment may not apply to you, but if you use a knife to harvest or scissors to prune your pruners to work on your vegetable garden, if it's contaminated, if you don't wash it properly, you're spreading the pathogens or diseases everywhere else with it. Okay, so a lot of people say there's a trend recently. I've noticed that there are sanitizers everywhere, even at the entrance of big stores. They have sanitizer wipe or sanitizer solution. In bathrooms, there are sanitizers. Well, that's great. But if your hands are not clean, you can use all the sanitizer in the world and it's not going to clean your hand, because there's a big difference between cleaning and sanitizing. Cleaning is the physical removal of dirt or any solids that may or may not be contaminated with pathogen. So first you have to physically remove the dirt from the surface with water, clean water and detergent. Then you sanitize it. Sanitizing means it's a treatment of a clean surface to reduce or eliminate microorganisms. Because an apple that you washed with soap and water, you wash the surface of it with soap and water, it's clean. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have any microorganisms or pathogens. You wash it and then you sanitize it, then you potentially you improved the cleaning and removal of potential microorganisms. If you have dirt on your hands and you use a sanitizer, You just sanitize the surface of that dirt. Your hands are still dirty. So in professional restaurants, they wash them with soap and water, and then they run them through a like a sanitizer solution to make sure that they are really clean. They don't just wipe them with a sanitizer solution and call it clean. Okay, so you cannot sanitize a dirty surface. You have to clean it first and then sanitize it. Wash your hands first. You remove, I don't want to say 99%, I'm not an expert, but you wash your hands first after using the bathroom. You want to be 100% confident. After you wash your hands, you can put sanitizer. Just using sanitizer after going to the bathroom is cosmetic. It's not really doing anything. I've alluded to this in the previous slide, but the most commonly implicated produce items are leafy greens because we consume a lot of it, and the way their surface is. Tomato because we consume a lot of it. Sprouts because they cannot be washed, they cannot be sanitized. They go from the production factory into the clamshell and eat consumed fresh. Of course, they are safe, but if there's any misstep in the production, that sprout is not safe anymore. Berries and melon, again, because they're consumed fresh, they're not. Berries, you cannot wash them; they'll fall apart. Melons, because of the I told you how their surface is like a sponge. So those five, and we all eat a lot of them. Be careful. Buy it from reputable source. If it doesn't look right, don't eat it at the farmer's market, or if you go on the farm. If the farm looks dirty, if the owner looks dirty, if the operation looks dirty, how do you know that their produce is clean? I've talked about this. So since the pathogens are all of fecal origin, then manure, if you use chicken, horse, cattle manure in the garden, you have to realize that dried or fresh, they have a potential of containing high amounts of pathogens in them. So we do not recommend at all applying fresh manure to your crops to use them unless you know how to use them, you have the right equipment, they are incorporated immediately, there's nothing left on the surface after they're applied. So for a homeowner, the risk is very high. We do not recommend you use fresh manure. And dry manure, it's still fresh in my opinion. What is safe to use is composted. You are gifted with a large amount, somebody gifts you a large amount of cattle manure or horse manure, put it in a compost pile and use it a few months later when the whole compost bin is ready. That is a lot safer than thinking that the dry manure is safe. So, if you know that manure is equal to fecal matter, equal to microbes, then that logically means equal to a potential contamination. So you want to keep manure away from produce, fresh produce as much as possible. And prevention is the goal because we, like I said, because of the nature of the vegetables, their skin structure, their how we consume them, it's not easy to clean like you would clean and sanitize a dish plate. So we want to focus on preventing the contamination. And this picture shows you different sources of contamination. You know, you may bring in the upper right, you may bring a very nice pile of compost, clean and ready to use, but you leave it sitting outside for months at a time. Well, it's not clean anymore. There's bird droppings, there's mice that dug in it, and left droppings. You never know. How can you be assured a month later that it's free of um, fecal matter? It's important to know signs that may be related to an infectious disease. For example, the one I highlighted in red, are high should ring a high alarm in your head that this may not be just a headache, could be, or I get sunstroke, could be a sign of an infectious disease. Nausea, vomiting, sweating, fever, diarrhea, abdominal cramps. Those are should be um, seen as a potential sign of an active infectious disease. You can't move, you have a headache, you have some pains, changes in skin color. Those are, less of an indication, and I'm not a medical doctor. Um, but to focus on the red items that I listed here, and if you know someone or you worked in the garden or you work with animal manure and a day later or you start having any of these symptoms, then you potentially have a pathogen, microorganisms. So let's look at this picture here, and of course, I don't expect you to answer. This is a one-way conversation. Of course, everybody, if I ask you what's wrong, everybody will notice that there's a tomato basket right next to the porta potty. That's obvious. But I see four other mistakes. I don't see a visible sign of a hand washing station. As a farm operation, if you have a porta potty, you should have a hand washing station next to it. Um, I don't see why is the unit here next to the shed, not near the field where it should be. I see it close to the pesticide sprayer. So here's chemical contaminant mixed with latrine contaminant. I see the blue lay flat, that blue hose that's used in irrigation. That's definitely contaminated and should not be used again in the field to irrigate, to use as drip irrigation. But most importantly, the last one I see is these two units, the sprayer tank and the porta potty, being close to the building. You notice that they cannot mow around them. The tall grass will invite crickets and grasshoppers and worms and all kind of insects, and those insects will invite predators like mice and rats and snakes, and mice and rats and snake may find themselves inside the building and contaminate the boxes, everything else. So you are creating an environment to increase the risk of potential contaminants that may enter your cleaning and washing operation. Okay. This picture was out of focus on purpose, but you see toilet paper in the woods. Well, if you have to go, you have to go. If as a worker, you have to go. But the problem is, okay, you didn't wash your hands before go back, continue harvesting fruits and vegetables. What's wrong with this picture? This is a nice operation. They're wearing gloves. They're sorting peppers. There looks clean operation, professional operation. What's wrong with this picture is the watch, the jewelry watch in the first hand you see on the left. That can be a source of a physical contaminant, because remember, contaminants are not limited only to pathogens. They're limited to chemical and physical object. If that watch breaks, the glass dial or whatever falls apart and crushes, and there's parts everywhere, that whole load has to be dumped. So that is a mistake. So even at the home level, you wash. You're not packing or sorting this much volume, but maybe you want to remove everything if you want to make sure they don't get contaminated. Because you're wearing watch, you're wearing jewelry, and you're handling manure. You may wash your hands and it's clean, but how do you know that your watch with all the hidden corners and hidden nooks and crannies that got sanitized well? What's wrong with this picture is you are not allowed to drink or eat when you are working with fruits and vegetables on a commercial scale. I cannot tell you what to do on a homeowner scale. But if you are dealing with manure, I definitely recommend you don't try to drink or eat while you're handling manure. Wear gloves and be on the safe side. This picture is, I call it good intentions. Operation looks nice, trash can, air blower to dry their hands, everything. But then he puts the gloves on the trash can, dries his hand, and then wears the glove again. Well, that glove is dirty to begin with. You wash your hands, you touch the glove again, your hands are dirty again. So it's preferable if you are in a commercial operation, may not apply to you, to work with disposable gloves. This, to me, is the best of all worlds. It's a foot-operated pedal that will start the water, the soap, disposable paper towels. The man looks clean, hairnet, clean clothes, a clean floor. If you visit a farm and you are impressed with how clean it is, you can imagine that everything else is clean, including the produce they are selling. And I encourage you to make a good relation with the buyer, with the seller at the farmer's market. Get to know them. If they welcome you to visit at their farm, tell them, hey, I want to buy directly from you. I'd like to visit your farm. Or, visit, make a personal relationship with them, and be a loyal customer. But at the same time, when you visit their farm, don't hesitate to point out weaknesses in their operation. If you see something flagrantly wrong, a pile of manure right next to the field, you see somebody using the bathroom in the field, things like that based on today's presentation. And with that, my presentation is over.